right, Sandwich, you hear this. The socialist movement isn't just looking for more primary wins. One DSA leader says the U.S. Constitution itself stands in the way of their planned revolution, as these resurfaced comments give Republicans a new midterm attack line.
The two things that we're famous for is our commitment to a program and our hatred of the United States Constitution. And what the program does is it gives us a roadmap to revolution, and it gives us the obstacle that we finally will have to get over to have a revolution, which is the United States Constitution, the basis of the United States government.
All right. So with that, here now, Washington Times editor-at-large Alex Swoyer and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. Leslie, I bet you're just thrilled that these folks are running as Democrats.
Well, he's not running. I was going to ask, what office is he running for? He doesn't have any political power to pass legislation. And honestly, until this piece that I researched for, I've never heard of him. Sorry. Here's the thing. It makes me laugh as a Democrat to hear Republicans, if they want to use that attack line, that's lovely. Because I have a list, and I just have one index card. I have 3 more in my purse.
Oh, wait a minute. Are we about to do whataboutism?
No. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't say Democrats hate and Democratic socialists or Democrats hate the Constitution when the president and the Republicans don't seem to love it very much. When you talk about a third term, not constitutional. When you talk about, and you want to have an executive order to go around birthright citizenship with the Supreme Court, thank God, upheld, which is in the Constitution. When you want to remove citizens, and when you want to have no warrants and ICE can just break down doors, unconstitutional. When the president tries to freeze or pull back funds that are already mandated and approved and passed legislatively by Congress, then when you, I mean, how many more do you want? The problem here is, you know, I guess hold my beer, I would say, you know, as a Democrat, I'm not a Democrat socialist, a moderate Democrat, when they want to attack one person who has the freedom of speech to say that, as much as we may not like what he's saying, but he doesn't have the power. He's not running for office. And honestly, it is the pot calling the kettle black, because Republicans
But I
and
guess the big
president
issue, though, Alex, is whether or not people at large are going to vote for these folks who come right out and say maybe he's not running for anything, but he represents DSA positions.
Exactly.
And we know what their program is. Are people going to vote for that?
Leslie referenced the Supreme Court upholding birthright citizenship, some of these checks and balances we have. The problem is that DSA wants to remake the Supreme Court, right? They want to pack it. They want to, you mentioned, abolish ICE. Get rid of the Senate. That's not very democratic to itself.
Get rid of the presidency.
Exactly. So phase out prisons. You know, this type of policy is the problem. And I think there was a poll, Marquette Law School had a really interesting poll earlier this month, which I dove into. And it talks about how DSA, the policies, are viewed more unfavorably than MAGA and President Trump. I think that's key going into November, the midterms, when we're looking at general elections, and heading into 2028. You know, President Trump is not on the ballot despite this whole tease about a third term. The Democratic Party is going to have to look at, you know, running on something other than orange man bad. And these DSA policies are problematic. One of that Marquette poll I referenced, the unfavorable rating of the DSA has actually increased in the past 4 months. It tells me Republicans are doing great on messaging. These types of clips would be great for advertising in places like Michigan, Georgia, Maine. I think about Shannon Bream's interview last month with, I think it was the DSA co-chair, where she affirmed, you know, wanting to abolish the Senate, all of this. This is just music to Republicans' ears.
Right. So obviously these people are going to win in the districts that were really, really deep blue, places like New York. Whether al-Sayed wins or not is another issue. But even though you have a lot of establishment Democrats who are saying, look, I would never embrace any of those positions, some of them, like Bill de Blasio, appear to be willing to turn a blind eye to it just for the sake of winning. Listen to what he said.
We desperately needed rejuvenation. This newer Democratic Party, I don't care about the DSA label, and I don't agree with the DSA platform on many levels, nor do these progressive candidates. What I'm seeing is candidates with energy and urgency who are talking to the American people directly. Are
you willing to turn a blind eye to what the DSA stands for just to win?
Well, I am willing to have that big tent. I know people get angry about that. And by the way, El Sayed is not DSA. But the message that
no, he's not. But he's got 5 of 7 main policies that align with the DSA.
The message that is resonating with voters, and it's not. I would disagree. We did have in the last election, oh, we're not the orange guy bad. But no, what we saw, we didn't listen to what the American people, specifically the working class, the middle class, wanted and needed. And what they want is under the umbrella and that big tent of affordability. Right. So when you say we're going to give you free education, free health care, free child care, we're going to help make life more affordable for you, that resonates. We saw it in New York. The mayor of New York has one of the highest approval ratings of any politician in the United States.
Some people say when all of that comes out, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z. The next question is, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, exactly. I think that's one issue. Raising taxes is something that's not going to play well come general election, midterms, all of that. One of these platforms, I can't remember which DSA candidate it is, but is really pushing for, government owning all of our airlines. Less government, more fun is kind of my position. I think a lot of people try to stay away from the DMV. They don't even want to have to go there, let alone think about trying to fly through with the government interference. I think that's not going to play well. Yes, affordability is good messaging. It's actually policy. And with some of these DSA candidates, I think that they have been focused on that. I think individually, some of them are extremely charismatic, which plays well. But overall, big picture, I don't think it's good for the Democratic Party moving forward. And I don't think it's good for all of Americans. When both parties are moving further away from the middle, it's problematic.
Well, it's going to pedal's going to get pushed to the metal in the next couple of weeks or so, and then flat out in November. Good to see you, ladies. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, Sandra.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.